All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Nick Saller. Nick, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to this. And I want to start off by just giving a shout out to Steve Catton because Steve, he was the one that introduced you and I. And without him, we would have probably never even met. And Steve's just one of those guys, man, he's got such a big heart. He's doing some amazing stuff. And when he sends me a message, says, Kev, I want to introduce you to Nicholas because he would be an amazing guest for your podcast. I am all in, man. And so you and I have already got to have a conversation and get to know each other. And through that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this interview and stuff. And so we're gonna have a good conversation today, Nick. and so
Yeah, for sure.
so I just want to start by let's set some context and give you some space to share around what you're working on and what are you working on right now that's got you super jazzed and excited and who do you serve? And we'll just start there.
That's such a good question. Thank you, Kevin. So, what am I working on right now? I'm working on bridging the gap between uncertainty and comprehension when it comes to AI and business for professionals. So, there's a lot of uncertainty around AI right now,
Yep.
and there's a lot of hype and hyperbole. So, I find myself at the intersection between AI and business and leadership and making it all make sense. And so, who do I serve? I serve everybody from business owners who are trying to make sense of all this, all the way to professionals at every level within an organization. So, in the evenings, I find myself teaching AI extension courses through colleges across the United States. And
Okay.
then during the day, I'm generally speaking and sharing topic specific information for businesses when it comes to AI and specifically business and leadership in AI.
Gotcha. Okay. So how long have you been doing this, Nick?
So I actually had my first foray into AI personally back in the aughts. I did AI for the first time professionally in a professional turnaround back in the 2014, 2015 time period. And it
Okay.
was all an accident. I don't want to make it sound more amazing than it is. I was looking for a way to fast track patient documentation for some healthcare providers. And the tech that was available at the time was highly expensive. And this was a turnaround. It couldn't be approved. And so I tried to figure out another way, and AI just happened to be that way to create speech to text, and it was available. It was just as good as the very expensive software and microphones that were needed to do it, and it
Wow.
was free. And so I didn't realize it, but then several years later, a friend of mine asked me and said, "Hey, we're going to be having a speaking engagement with panelists discussing AI for small business owners. Would you like to join in?" And so that kind of brought me into like 2021, 2022, and that conversation happened, I think. And then from there, it just kind of has blossomed into teaching and speaking and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah. But you know what? That's how the best things unfold is just completely organically like that, And
Yeah,
I know that is certainly how I got into doing what I do. It wasn't my core thing at all.
right.
It was just something I started doing. And I found out, like, dang, I'm really good at this. I've got a God-given gift and ability for this.
Yeah.
And and so so what I'm trying to figure out how I want to frame this question. I'm just kind of thinking of my audience who, where my audience are entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs, and stuff. And I'm sure that some of them are probably doing some really cool stuff with AI. Most of them are probably like, man, I'm trying to just sift through all the hype and stuff and figure out where we even fit in with all this. And then there's probably others that are like, man, I'm not even sure I'm on board with this at all. I don't even know if I like
Sure.
this whole thing. so,
Yep.
and it doesn't matter where, heck, they might be at a place where they're doing 500,000 a year in their business, or they might be doing 750 million a year in their business.
Yep.
But you got all those spectrums, regardless of size of business and stuff. And so how do you address all of that?
Good question. So I look at the overall picture and try to find what is the simplest solution that's going to be sustainable. And so there's this kind of obscure guy. His name was Steve Jobs, and he said,
Oh yeah, that obscure
"Yeah,
guy.
that guy." You said simple scales and complex fails, and I think we're seeing that right now in real time. There's so much hype around complex implementations of AI, and they're failing. And MIT did a study, and they found that 95% of those kind of complex applications fail within workplaces if they're being done internally. And what I found is just as with business turnarounds prior to specifically focusing in AI in business is simple scales. And so what I like to do with any business, it doesn't matter the business is first and foremost, help people understand what they're going to do with all the extra time they get if they're going to implement AI. So AI is just a tool. And if you're just using it as a tool, then it's just a really fancy calculator. But when you start thinking multidimensionally, it starts to make a whole lot more sense. So I work with leaders and business owners to understand first and foremost, what are everyone's three most valuable priorities when it comes to what they do professionally? Each person has one to three most valuable priorities that only they can contribute to the organization within they work.
Okay.
So whether they own the business, whether they work in the business, it does not matter. But each person has one to three. If you have more than that, then you have too many priorities. But once you understand and identify those, then what you start to think about is, okay, what are simple solutions I can put in place right now that are AI focused to start grabbing time back? And I'll give you one, and this I mentioned a little bit earlier. This is one that just completely escapes people. Speech to text is native on pretty much all devices right now. That is AI. You can type about 50 to 60 words per minute. You can speech to text 2 to 3x that. If I said to someone, hey, I want to give you 1 to 2 working months back in a year just on email alone, people go, I'm interested. And
Hmm.
then you say, well, what is it worth to you? Well, multiply your salary times 1 to 2 working months, and then you have an idea what it's worth to each individual. So something as simple as speech to text, which most organizations don't even have this on their radar yet. That is a simple solution that's sustainable, that can scale across the organization, and you can multiply it whether it's times 2 weeks or 2 months times people's salaries, and you can see real savings in real time. So once you start grabbing that time back, then you take the time and you have to assign it to something more productive. And when you assign it to higher level tasks, aka focusing on your 1 to 3 most valuable priorities, that's a great start. But alongside of that, you need to focus on building your leadership skills too, because the fact with AI, teams are going to shrink and productivity is going to go up, or the expectations of productivity are going to go up with smaller teams. So the
Okay.
key here is we're going to need world-class leaders, and there's a tremendous shortage of these folks right now. So the key here is to, if it's not one of people's most valuable priorities, they need to be training up in leadership too. So they're going to focus on their three most valuable priorities. They're going to focus on leadership training, and then they're going to take a piece of the saved time from whatever AI implementation that is identified
Mhm.
and put that back into doubling down on AI implementations. Sticking with simple first, sticking with sustainable first, and growing there before adding complexity. And I just present on this to just short of about 1,000 people, and that was by far the most impactful thing that we talked about, and the thing that we got the most comments on was this strategy towards most valuable priorities alongside of AI, alongside of leadership.
Okay. Okay. So, and you don't have to name names when I'm asking you this question, but what's an example of a result that you've helped someone or a company or what have you get that you are just incredibly proud of, Nick?
That's a fabulous question. So I was fortunate to go into a company that was 2 weeks from closing, and it was a really dire situation. And within 30 days, I was able to help turn it around to cash flow positive. And
Wow.
within a year, it was $1 million company. That was during the Great Recession, so everything was working against companies back then.
Hmm.
This company was, it was red line, bad situation. And so obviously it's, some things being put into place, but it's also a little bit of luck too. I mean, I think that when we're honest with ourselves, it's always great when things turn out the way that we hope they do. But that was a big one there. That was a big turnaround.
That's a huge win, man. I bet they were pretty grateful for that. It's-
Very grateful for sure.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay, so I'm sure now at this point we've got people thinking like, okay, you know what? Maybe I might want to have a conversation with Nick, or maybe I might know somebody that Nick should be talking with, and I'll just let if you're sitting here listening to this, I'll let you know we'll circle back around with you on that later. I'll make sure we don't leave you empty-handed and stuff, and I want to switch gears just a little bit now, and so Nick, I want to ask you, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons. And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you. That's a great question. And a little tiny backstory. I grew up in a very humble beginnings and stuff like that. And so I do have to say I had two parents that cared for sure. They did work very hard, had very little. And with that in mind, they also gave me some great life lessons. Beyond that, my uncle started with those same humble beginnings, and he built five companies from scratch and retired at the age of 40. I learned a lot about business from observing him. He is a very generous man from the standpoint of giving his knowledge and setting people up for success. So I definitely soaked a lot of that in. But at that point in my 20s, I started to kind of self-limit and thinking that I knew a little bit too much, as we often do if we try to overestimate our abilities. And so what happened was I met an amazing woman. And so my wife, now of 15 years, I was doing a turnaround, and in this particular turnaround, my brain was cooking all night long because I was thinking about how to save this. And so I was up at 2 in the morning playing this silly video game just to cool my brain down. And she says, "Hey, if I hear one more dingity ding ding ding, I'm going to take your phone from you." And I got to tell you, my wife is the most kind individual. So I thought she was kidding. And so I started laughing, and she says, "No, you're going to have a heart attack if you don't stop." And she says, "Why don't you try to start reading when you go to sleep?" And I was like, I said, "Oh, I don't read. I don't read." And so I said, "I'm a slow reader." And she says, "Well, what about audiobooks?" And I couldn't argue with that. And so that started me on a trajectory of reading intensely about business and leadership and stuff like that. Really changed a massive course of my life's trajectory. And then from that point forward, with the AI conversation, I was fortunate to be able to just stumble upon it. But I think it was about 2021 or 2022, somewhere in that time period, a friend, just a colleague that we had, been in networking groups and stuff, and we had known each other more friendly, and I helped give her some thoughts on our business and stuff. She said, "Hey, I'm going to be speaking on AI as a panelist for small business owners. And I know that you are aware of the topic and have some thoughts on stuff like that." And so she gave me this opportunity. I made this video. I didn't think much of it as a introduction for me as a panelist because we had to do an introduction instead of just writing a few sentences. I made this video and it showed me doing AI in real time. And so didn't think anything of it, but that video, because she gave me that opportunity, led to three more speaking opportunities literally right after that event.
Wow.
And so I would say those are the folks that have really invested in me and made some major shifts in my life in very positive directions. So
Yeah. So were the speaking engagements that they led to afterwards, was that from people who were in attendance at that event? So
yeah,
they saw you speak there and they're like, we need to bring him in too and stuff.
yeah, it would. I have to say there was certainly some fortune involved of being in the right place at the right time and having that opportunity. But the video that I created was impactful to the level that at a completely separate and unrelated event that evening, they were still talking about it. And so that led to two more speaking engagements through that organization alone, and then a third speaking organization for a separate or a speaking engagement for a separate organization just from that one event.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was in what year you said?
I think it was maybe 2021, 22. It
Okay.
could be as early or as recent as 2023. I'm sorry, I didn't think about,
That's all
I
right.
should have
That's all
my
right.
dates down for
So
today.
so how many more speaking engagements have you done now since then? You may
Uh,
maybe you're not even going to know the number, but just ballpark.
I've been fortunate. I don't know the exact number of speaking engagements, but at this point, when it comes to AI for professionals in business, I've spoken to over 2,000 people or trained them as a kind of a hybrid, either through college extension courses or just standalone speaking events. I've been fortunate to be in front of over 2,000 folks on the topic, so it's cool.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. So, um, so if I want and once again, you don't have to name names or anything, but what is an example of a situation where you got to have this really big impact, and maybe even in the moment, maybe it kind of surprised you a little bit, but you also know that that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with either one of the people that you were just talking about. What's an example of something like that, Nick?
Oh, Kevin, can you restate the question just one more time? I want to, that's a strong question. I want to make sure I have it all
Yeah.
together before I answer.
Yeah. So, an example of a situation where you personally got to make a really substantial impact. And like I said, it's substantial enough that you were like, wow, look at just what happened there. Maybe it even surprised you a little bit. And you also know that that would have never been possible on your own. That would have not been possible if not for your relationship with either one of the people, your wife or this other person that you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's just that they both invested in me from a personal and professional standpoint because they believed in my opportunities to be able to add value to conversations and stuff like that. And all of that came into a culmination where I was uh, recently asked to speak on or to teach college extension courses, and that came from specifically my wife saying, "Hey, you need to start reading," which helped me grow as a professional because I would have been stuck. I would have been the same person at 29 or at 47 that I was at 29 if it wasn't for that. And then my friend Kate, she said, "Hey, do you want to speak on this?" And so having the opportunity to speak in front of people and seeing what resonated and people say, "Wow, that was, really it stood out to me what you said." To being able to go ahead and be a part of a conversation that led to teaching college extension courses and impacting people where now it's amazing because I'll be teaching again this evening and which is kind of cool. It's funny that we're doing this today, but it's neat because instead of just focusing on content and oh you have to do it this way and all these things and stuff like that, I focused on what the individual needs, and it was because people first invested in me. Then I realized that it's more about the individuals and building the relationships with the individuals and what they need. And now people very kindly write kind feedback to say thanks for getting a very personalized experience rather than just going to a college extension course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's your vision for this going forward? And what's your vision for this going forward? And what's your vision for your role in this going forward?
That's a really good question. So, um, I would like to see my role be specifically at the corner of decreasing uncertainty and putting hyperbole to rest and putting hype to rest and making it so that instead of businesses paying tremendous amounts of money to have implementations that don't succeed, and then everybody goes, "Oh, we told you so, it wasn't ready." I'd like to start with, helping companies understand, hey, we could do sustainable things first and really create quantum leaps with your productivity and your scale and stuff like that. And to make it so that companies go, wow, I didn't realize that a lot of this stuff was already at my fingertips and I could do this today. I don't need some sort of, special build or something. And then the other piece is, and this is interesting, is that recently I've had several folks that are people of faith ask me about AI and the impact from having a faith perspective. And so they're very worried, and I rightfully so, that AI is doing bad things to people of faith and stuff like that. And here's my quick 2 cents on this, and I'm grateful to be a part of this conversation. Never thought I would find myself here, but I guess it's here. And so this is how I look at AI, and for specifically for people of faith. I'm a Christian, so I want to say that this is conversations I've had with Christian folks, but I think this applies to folks of all faiths. But AI is just a tool, okay? And everything is either a tool or a weapon. And so I think people are worried about AI being weaponized. It's people who are going to weaponize it. And so you can take a pea, and if you eat it, it's a tool. It's a tool of nutrition. If you throw it at someone, it's a weapon. However ineffective, it's still a weapon. Unfortunately, with AI, it's going to be a weapon of really incredible proportions. But I think if folks are focused on using it as a tool, it's going to do amazing things for people at scale, not just more profit, more revenue, that sort of stuff. I think it'll solve some really big challenges. And my background is in healthcare. And so, with that in mind, I've seen some pretty incredible advances when it comes to AI for treating conditions that hospitals couldn't help with. I've seen it help radiologists look at scans and be more effective. So I see the good in it. I think if we focus on the good and try to ensure against the downside of the bad, I'd like to be a part of that conversation too.
Yeah. Very cool. So whenever I get the opportunity to interview somebody for the podcast that is involved in AI, because I have barely even dipped my toes and I've played with Chat GPT a little teeny bit.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I mean, the stuff I've done is pretty cool for sure. But I've just barely even dipped my toes in the water. I have been over here doing my thing, just doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on relationships.
Yeah.
And over the last 3 years, especially, we have grown so much in the last 3 years, and it's been such an amazing ride, and it feels in my heart that it's the right thing. But I'm
Sure.
just curious, with your experience, how do you, I mean, like me being this connector and conduit of trust for entrepreneurs, how do you believe, how is AI going to play in with that? Or is there things I should be looking out for? And like, this is a completely like self-serving question right here.
Well, that's a great question. So, how will AI play into it? Here's the thing is that technology has shifted way more quickly than humans have evolved. So, I think AI just creates this tool of scale. But when it comes down to it, the more tech and the more tools we have and the more automation we have, the more we're going to create or crave relationships, at least for the folks that are relational by nature. And what I see is that folks like Steve Caton and yourself and me too. I crave relationships first and foremost, and in real world leadership and stuff like that. Is I think that people are going to use AI in several different ways, but the folks that are relational based, they're going to find ways to enhance their level of meaningful organic impact with the people that they interact with. So
Okay.
AI is going to be, kind of a sidecar that helps them deliver more meaningful things, more impactful things, and do it in maybe customized scale, mass customization, or maybe it's a nice little thing that it does where it automatically orders a thoughtful gift based on a conversation that you have with a valued connection, and it heard something in the conversation and said, Kevin, I found this. Do you want to send this to this person? It was based on the conversation you had with them. I think that's a thoughtful use where that is sustainable, and it's because you signed off on it and said, wow, that actually was a part of the conversation. I do want to send that. I think that's a unique way to use AI where it's not just going to be like a rubber stamp where everybody's what they create is the exact same. And that's the other side of the coin is that if it's used too much where people just kind of go, oh, I'm just going to use it to replace everything I do and then I don't have to think anymore. Well, it's just a fancy calculator that eventually will put you out of quote business as a professional because you'll either lose your job, you'll be automated out of, the workforce or whatever. But if you're doing things like we just talked about, where you have a meeting with someone and maybe you put your notes into an AI LLM or large language model system, and you say, I had this meeting with this person. You don't identify the person or any specific events that make it so that it's going into the model. And you say, what are some things that you can think of from this conversation that I might want to remember? And what is one small thing I can do for this person that might be meaningful? Now, some people might say that's cheating, but here's the thing, you're still putting in the effort to understand, and you're still going to have to select from what it comes back from. And I think that, everybody's going to have a different take on this, but when I see it as a enhancer of relationships. I see it as an enhancer of businesses. And I don't see it as a replacement for people as long as people are willing to put their creative spin on top of whatever they're creating with AI, because everybody's unique, everybody's individual, everybody's got their own unique gifts. And if you use those on top of AI, it just becomes a force multiplier for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I don't want to see it as like a rubber stamp, but instead something where it makes relationships more meaningful.
Yeah.
For you, Kevin, I mean, you're in the relationship business, and if you can look at what are the most meaningful pieces in the relationship sequences that you build, not that it's a sequence, but there are patterns in relationships and there's patterns in
Sure.
everything. So if you see things where it's like, if I did this one thing, and I'm going to go back to speech to text because it's so simple and it's available to everyone. Everybody can understand it like literally today. That's what's so cool about it. If you did speech to text for all your emails, it may take you 1 to 2 or 3 working months a year. The average for a professional is 1/4 of their year is spent on email alone. So
Wow.
imagine you spend 3 months of your working year on email, and I say, hey, Kevin, I want you to just do one email per day for a week. And then next week, try to see if you can get 2 emails in per day with speech to text. Okay. And by week 3, you're up to 3 emails. And by week 10, you've automated all your emails. Instead of 3 months, now it takes you 3 weeks. And that's a real number. Like if you get fast and you're a faster talker, you can take 3 months worth of work and turn it into 3 weeks. What can you do to enhance relationships with all that extra time that you have?
Yeah.
That's one of your most valuable priorities is enhancing and building relationships with people because you're in the relationship part of life. That's what you focus on the most. And so imagine taking what used to take you 12 weeks, now it takes 3. You have 9 extra weeks a year to focus on enhancing relationships and building relationships.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. And for anybody that's listening to this, going, man, Kev, I really like Nick. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. And I think maybe he might be able to help me or help us if they're talking about their company, or maybe I know somebody else that might be worthwhile having a conversation with Nick. What's the best way for somebody to follow up with you if they wanted to have that kind of a conversation?
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Kevin. So I live on LinkedIn. That's my presence in the digital world. I keep a low profile. That's on purpose. So you can reach me on LinkedIn anytime. Nicholas J.
Okay.
Saller. I'm fortunate to have kind of a rare last name, so it's easy to find me.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Any last thing you feel led to share, Nick, before we call it a wrap?
No, I think Kevin, with what you do is that's a big piece of what we're going to need going forward is stronger, deeper relationships because the fact as tech gets more and more intense, it's going to be relationships that we crave. So I would just say, folks are out there trying to build themselves professionally. Yes, it's critical to learn about AI as a skill set, but also relationship building and leadership is the other half of the two skill set, the double skill set that everybody needs as a professional going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today, to share from your heart. I am really excited to get this out there and share it with a lot of other entrepreneurs. And so, once again, Nick, thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. Really appreciate it and really appreciate you.
Kevin, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on your show today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're so welcome.